When Space Marine 2 launched, I was really critical of the game because it lacked content, replayability, and challenge, but nowadays, Space Marine 2 may just be the best Warhammer 40k game out there. Don't get me wrong, on launch there was never anything wrong with Space Marine 2's gameplay, visuals, or atmosphere, but it fell short of what I was looking for in a AAA game that was supposed to be the successor to one of my favorite games of all time, the original Space Marine. Fast forward in time, and the game has had several impactful updates that have addressed nearly every one of the criticisms that I had when it launched. And the developers have even revealed what they plan to add in the future, like a horde mode, a new class, and new melee weapons, all of which sound amazing. But before we dive into all that, let's recap everything that's been added to Space Marine 2 post-launch that has made the game better than ever. For those of you who don't already know, Space Marine 2 features 3 game modes: a campaign, operations, and eternal war. The campaign acts as a great introduction to Warhammer 40k, and from a gameplay perspective, I see it as a good introduction to the game's other game modes. If you're a newcomer to 40k, then I highly recommend playing the entire campaign because it's going to educate you on a lot of the more current story beats in the franchise. The narrative isn't on the same level as a show like Andor or the Eisenhorn books by Dan Abnett, but it does a good job of outlining broad concepts like the state of humanity in the setting, explaining who the Tyranids are, and showing you what chaos is. Likewise, if you're not someone who typically plays action games, you'll want to play through the entire campaign as well just to get used to the game's various mechanics and to get accustomed to fighting its various enemies. Not only are you going to have to master aiming, shooting your gun, and hitting your shots, but you'll also have to engage in melee combat, dodge attacks, parry, and even riposte by taking advantage of gun strikes or block weapons. The way I see it, the campaign's good for what it is, which is primarily an introduction for 40k newcomers or new players to the game. However, Operations and Eternal War are the bread and butter for the majority of the community that engages with the game on a daily basis. The Operations game mode is Space Marine 2's replayable PvE experience, while Eternal War is the game's PvP experience. Both game modes feature 6 classes that each introduce their own unique playstyles and class identity to the game, and both game modes share the same gameplay mechanics that were introduced in the campaign. For the most part, that's where the similarities between Operations and Eternal War end, so let's dive into each game mode individually. In Operations, you play through missions to level up the various classes and weapons in the game so that you can tackle higher difficulties and build or refine your playstyle with perks that you unlock as you level up. From a gameplay perspective, the simplest way to explain the differences between the classes is to compare how much of their gameplay is spent in melee combat versus ranged combat, which varies depending on how you've built your Space Marine. For example, the Bulwark is the game's de facto tank, focusing on turning a good defense into a great offense by parrying attacks or blocking with its shield. The Assault spends as much time in melee as the Bulwark does, but is focused purely on offensive capabilities by charging into the action with its jump pack. The Vanguard also spends all of its time up close and personal, but most of its damage actually comes from its ranged weapons. The class is all about using its grappling hook to close the gap with enemies and shoot them in the face. The Tactical is all about weaving in and out of melee combat in order to get its Auspex scan debuff up on as many targets as it possibly can, then leaning on its powerful arsenal of ranged weapons to delete enemies. The Sniper pops in and out of invisibility to ambush enemies, whether that be with an actual sniper rifle, backstabbing them with their knife, or shooting them in the face with an entire magazine of bolter rounds. Lastly, the Heavy doesn't have any melee weapons at all. It completely focuses on being tanky with its Iron Halo while dealing massive damage at range with big guns. With 6 classes, this might sound like a lot of variety, but when Space Marine 2 released, it had 6 operations and 4 difficulties, with the final difficulty at the time being Ruthless, which didn't really feel ruthless at all. Since the game features a progression system where you have to replay the same missions over and over again to level up each Space Marine class and each weapon, the lack of mission variety and meaningful challenge made the game feel like a slog. Additionally, the weapon sandbox was a complete mess. Certain weapons like Meltaguns were extremely overpowered, and iconic weapons like the Bolter were underpowered, unless you were using the grenade variant, but at that point you weren't really using the Bolter, were you? Not to mention, each class was extremely limited by which weapons it was even allowed to use in the first place. All of these elements combined to create a repetitive experience that a lot of people got tired of really quickly. But as of patch 7.0, a lot of these problems have been addressed. The game now features 9 operations and 6 difficulties, and its hardest difficulty, Absolute, is an absolute blast to play. It's not a difficulty for casual players, but that's okay. There are players like me who want an experience that is going to absolutely dominate us and give us a reason to get better at the game. game, while other players may want to just experience a Space Marine power fantasy game, which is why the other difficulties exist. Personally, I feel motivated to get better at the game because it feels amazing to get swarmed by a massive horde of Tyranids or Chaos and 3 extremist enemies, but still manage to come out on top. It's literally the best feeling in the world. Additionally, the game rewards you for being skilled because absolute difficulty gives you a massive amount of XP. This is important because operations now feature a prestige system, which allows you to unlock more perks for your class to customize it even further, but this also resets your level as you prestige. Also, the arsenals of each of the classes was expanded to promote build variety, and due to some heavy balance changes that have been made since release, nearly every weapon combination or build is viable in absolute difficulty. Nowadays, operations provide a meaningful challenge, progression feels more rewarding than ever before, and there are so many ways to build each class, giving players access to tons of replayability. Pivoting over to Eternal War, when Space Marine 2 launched, the game mode featured its own progression system where you simply unlocked weapons as you played, 3 maps, and 3 different PvP game modes. You don't bring any of the class perks that you earn in operations into PvP, and each of the class's arsenals are refined for the sake of balance. I have a love-hate relationship with the PvP in this game because on one hand, I respect how straightforward it is. The experience is basically a cookie-cutter third-person class-based arena shooter with some mechanics that shake things up a little. For example, class abilities and war gear all interact with each other in pretty unique ways, but at the end of the day, the player with better aim and the team with better team shooting is gonna win, which is good. But Eternal War just doesn't feel as ambitious as Operations does. Since release, we've gotten 1 new PvP map, and the 2 weapons that were added to Operations were also added to PvP, but you can only use them on a select few classes, which is pretty sad. But honestly, it's not even the lack of maps that keeps me away from the game mode. I'd like to see more game modes get added that focus significantly more on fun. A big team battle map with a lobby of 24 players, 12 Space Marines, and 12 Heretic Astartes duking it out would not only be epic, but it would also be a really fun experience. This game isn't going to be an esport anytime soon, so I feel like the developers have a lot of room to experiment in order to carve out a unique space within the shooter genre, just like Titanfall 2 did. Regardless of everything I've just said, you might be the kind of gamer who always wants something to chase or unlock because that's what keeps you engaged at the end of the day. Space Marine 2 now features an achievement system in the form of ordeals and the Data Vault. These allow you to record your accomplishments in the game, unlock lore about different allies or enemies within the game, and get access to cosmetic goodies. And boy, oh boy, does this game have tons of cosmetic goodies. Space Marine 2 is like Animal Crossing, but for men. This game is the ultimate 40k dress-up simulator. By completing operations, winning an Eternal War, or by purchasing DLC, you unlock all sorts of different armor pieces, heraldry, and paint for your Space Marines. The amount of customization in this game has become insane, and it only seems to be getting crazier. In fact, honestly, just about everything about the game just keeps getting better with each free update. And the developers have talked about what's coming in the future, and what they've said is very exciting. In patch 8.0, Space Marine 2 is going to be getting a horde mode, which has been highly requested by the community since launch. Additionally, Absolute is going to be getting updated to be even harder, featuring more enemies that are going to be even more aggressive. Blood Angel and White Scar fans will be eating good because a Blood Angel cosmetic pack and a White Scar's champion pack are getting added to the game. And that's not all, because the developers have also confirmed that beyond patch 8.0, Space Marine 2 will be getting a new class and more melee weapons. My money is on a Tech Marine class that releases alongside an Iron Hands cosmetic or champions pack with a power axe. If Saber and Focus added all of that in at the same time, the community would absolutely lose it. My favorite thing about Space Marine 2 is that although a lot of these future cosmetic items aren't free, all of the other updates to the game, such as new operations, weapons, the horde mode, and everything else are completely free. It's all included with the price of the base game. And if you are a Warhammer 40k fan who absolutely has to own all of these cosmetics, you can drop an additional $40 for the annual seasonal pass for access to every cosmetic. Compared to other 40k games that exist in the co-op horde shooter space, that may or may not heavily feature an insanely predatory, expensive in-game microtransaction store that heavily leans on FOMO, or the fear of missing out by rotating a shop every 2 weeks, $40 is a damn good deal. Anyways guys, don't forget to like the video and subscribe if you love Warhammer. This has been Jeficus, and I'll see you in game.